All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. And I'm happy to welcome back friend of the pod, the Bulwark's, Will Saletan. Will, how you doing?
Doing all right, Matt. How are you?
I'm doing good, and things are changing, man. I don't know if you saw this, but Donald Trump, who was attacking Fed Chairman Jerome Powell for not lowering interest rates, now says he's not going to fire him. And China, we've imposed those massive tariffs on China. And now Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent is saying that perhaps there'll be some de-escalation, maybe even by the time we stop recording this. So who knows? But Will, what do you make of these reversals?
Well, so let me take them separately. Which one do you want to talk about first?
Let's go with the Fed, because that is a big one. And I have heard, I'm not an economics expert, but just threats of firing the Fed chairman have created problems in the market.
Yeah. So this whole fight between Trump and the Fed, or the extent to which Trump is threatening the Fed, is it's a big change in how the American government treats financial management, financial regulation in this country. And it has massive implications. So just a little context. Did this happen to you when you were younger? I was told, I'm a young person, you should be investing in the stock market. You should get a 401k, blah, blah. Well, should you pick stocks? No, you should put it in an index fund. Well, you should put it in a global index fund. No, they said, don't put your money in the global index fund, because other countries, not America, but other countries, you don't really know how transparent their economic system is. You can't evaluate. They're not properly regulated. They're not properly managed. The governments mess with their markets. So you can't count on them to be rational the way you can in the good old United States. So I view this attack by our president on the independence of the Fed as America becoming just like those other countries. If we have in our country, the markets cannot trust markets to work properly. The financial markets cannot trust business to work properly, and cannot trust financial regulation to work properly. Then people are just going to bail out. And we saw that when Trump, started with the global tariffs at the beginning of the month, right? Where people are selling out of the United States. We don't trust your market. We don't trust your bonds. And so to the extent that Donald Trump is attacking the Fed, that is a threat to every single person who has money in a 401k invested in the United States stock market, because the United States stock market will lose its value as a trustworthy place. And honestly, the entire U.S. economy, no one will trust our management of inflation if the president can arbitrarily decide. So that's my take. What's yours?
Yeah. Well, look, it's one thing to say we shouldn't have a Federal Reserve chairman who's tinkering around and using these instruments to manipulate the economy. That's a theory. It's entirely different to say, no, we should have him, but he should be doing it for political reasons, for short-term political benefits, which could be catastrophic, as you know well. If the Fed chairman believes that the best thing for the economy is to keep the interest rates where they are, but he is pressured by the president to lower rates, that could have all sorts of implications, long-term implications. And of course, the danger is this stagflation, which is incredibly damaging, as what happened in the 70s, and it's very hard to get out of, and it takes going through a lot of pain, but presidents don't want to go through pain. So it'd be prolonged. So this is a dangerous thing, and it's good to see Trump. In my opinion, this is the market working, in a sense, the market being public opinion and the media. So Donald Trump, make no mistake, is backing down. He is blinking, and that's good, because it means he is finally responding to market incentives. Once again, the free market does work.
Right. That is actually a big deal, because there was a question when Trump started the trade war and the markets tanked. So they tanked for a day, they tanked for another day. It went over the weekend. Trump was still saying, we're going to hold firm. We believe we're going to drop this tariff wall and keep it here till everybody comes to invest in our country. Don't pay attention to the stock market. He said, we've got trillions of dollars in new investment coming into our country. They'll build factories. It'll all work out in the end. And I don't know about you, Matt. Did you do this? I was freaking out, because at least in the first Trump administration, when the market dived Donald Trump cared about that. I mean, even COVID, the only metric he paid attention to in COVID, it wasn't deaths. It wasn't like infections. It was, how's the stock market doing? And if the stock market went down, that was a bad day for Donald Trump, and he cared about it. So I was getting scared that in this administration, he was just like no longer responsive to the markets. So I'm very happy to see that in the case of, you could argue in the case of both the Fed and China, he's responding to that.
Yeah. And of course, when the Dow began to drop, he did respond to, he responded to the bond market, it seems like, but he did back off those reciprocal tariffs a couple of weeks ago, which is another example of him, responding to something, right? To some signal, because again, there are people literally on Fox News saying, we're not going to show the ticker, we're not going to show the stock market ticker anymore. And pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. Like, don't check your stock portfolio. Just trust in Trump. Literally.
Right.
Literally.
Right. Okay. Have we talked before about the Fox ticker? I mean, I'm sure you've talked about it with other folks, but this was insane. Like, I don't know why this set me off in a way nothing else about Fox News has. Like, I expect Fox News it's going to do its propaganda. It's like state media for the right and all that. And like, okay, and people have other choices, but to like delete a piece of basic information, numerical information from your audience, that was shocking to me. For some reason, that crossed some line of totalitarian denial. I mean, admittedly, it's one network. You can go to MSNBC. You should not have to. If you are a conservative American, you shouldn't have to go to MSNBC to see.
But they don't, Will. I mean, there are millions and millions of Americans who watch Fox News essentially 24/7. No joke.
Yeah. Yeah.
No joke.
And for those of us who are not of the right, we've seen Fox News just disappear a major story in the news. We're not going to talk about it. It's embarrassing to the administration. I can't think of what the latest example is. Was it maybe the Signal chat was one for a while? Anyway, but to disappear the ticker was totally crazy. But let me come back to the point that you were talking about Trump responding to the market. It's really important for the government of our country to be responsive to something. Right? Like when we complain about authoritarianism in this country, some of it is, we like our freedoms. We don't want one man and the people around him to make all the decisions for everybody. We have a constitutional system and all that. That's sort of a, constitutional, moral, legal argument. But even just to manage a country, you need your government to be responsive, and you can get such a degree of insulation and disregard for external stimuli that the government does more than invade, to violate the separation of powers, deprive people of their rights. It screws up the most basic thing, which is crashes the economy. You crash the economy. There's people waiting to retire. They've lost 10% of their retirement. What happens if they lose 20% of their retirement? The damage can just escalate. You get unemployment, you get the economy seizing up, you get stagflation. So it's really important to see signs that the government is responsive, and I'm relieved to have seen it.
Well, it is good, but you know what's going to happen, Will? There will not be, and this will happen if Pete Hegseth gets fired, you'll see this play out as well. There will never be an admission, we made a mistake, we hired the wrong person, maybe we shouldn't have made the tariffs so high on China, maybe we shouldn't have imposed the tariffs to begin with, maybe we shouldn't have attacked Jerome Powell. Like, there will never be that admission. What will happen is that they will airbrush history, they will gaslight us, and they will tell us this was the plan all along. So you just don't get it, man. There's a master plan. Donald Trump's, he's playing 4D chess, and this is all part, he had to say that because he needed to trick people into whatever. You recently have been writing and talking about this phenomenon, this very 1984 propaganda-ish stuff going on, but how, talk if you would about that.
Sure. Yeah. So I did this as a piece and then as a video for the Bulwark, and I just chose the tariff war as an example because it was just very stark to me how in the course of a week, basically from April 2nd to April 9th, Donald Trump completely reversed course on the tariffs because they were crashing the economy, and they didn't even acknowledge it. The government didn't acknowledge it. Now, Matt, I've lost perspective. You'll have to remind me. In the Obama administration, in the Bush administration, in the Bush one, in Clinton, in Reagan. Was this a thing where the government would just pretend that nothing had changed? This feels new. This feels like a new level of denial. You had Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary, Howard Lutnick, the Commerce Secretary, Caroline Levitt, the Press Secretary, Peter Navarro, the Trade Advisor, Kevin Hassett, another economic advisor. All these people going out and just flat denying that what had happened, right?
Calling it fake news.
Right. That it's fake. First it was literally for like 3 days. It is fake news that we're going to pause the tariffs for 90 days. And then they paused the tariffs for 90 days. And suddenly it's fake news that there ever was a previous position that we were going to stick to the tariffs. It was about negotiations all along. So what I did in this video was just show people the before and after clips where you can see what they said before, what they say now. It was an obvious reversal, and this bizarre pretense that nothing had changed. And so I was just talking about how in itself, that is alarming, that the government won't even, they think they can get away with denying what they all said literally a day ago, 2 days ago.
We've always been at war with Oceania.
Yeah. So in 1984, the line is there's three giant, countries: Oceania, East Asia, and Eurasia. And Oceania, being the 1984 country, we're at war with East Asia. We're absolutely at war. We've always been at war with East Asia, and we've been allied with Eurasia. And then they would switch. They would suddenly be fighting the other war, and they would deny the previous. We've always been at war with Eurasia.
Yeah. No, I mean, if you have, I'm sure most people have read 1984, but sometimes, there are gaps and people miss things. So if you haven't read 1984, go read 1984. I think Orwell's Animal Farm and 1984 are, must reads, and certainly during this time. And it's, look, he was like a socialist, but he saw what the communists and the fascists were doing, how they were using these techniques that frankly are now being used by the current administration in many ways. Quite well. And now we have more technology to promote them. But you can also debunk them using video, as you have done, Will, over at YouTube.
Yeah, as long as the video exists, as long as we have independent media, it can still be done. But it is kind of impressive to me how this is happening in the Republican Party of the United States. This was in Orwell's time. This was it was totalitarianism. Orwell was writing a lot about, his analogs were to the communists, right? And we said, our Republican Party, our conservative party said, we're going to stand up against the totalitarians, against the communists. But what we have now is the heir to the Republican Party. The Republican Party has become a cult around one man, admittedly an authoritarian party, not really a totalitarian one. But these techniques that they're using now to just obliterate the past as recently as a week ago, a couple of days ago, those are totalitarian techniques being adopted by the party that claimed to stand for freedom against totalitarianism.
And, as long as we have, you mentioned, as long as we have the freedom and the press to point these things out. And we've recently seen Senator Lisa Murkowski say that she's afraid of retaliation. This is a sitting senator. We just saw the head producer of 60 Minutes resign because he feels he can no longer produce intellectually honest and independent content that is not being skewed in a more pro-Trump direction. So it's not a foregone conclusion that that this will always be possible.
Matt, what do you know about Hungary? Because it's what I feel like what's definitely going on in the United States. Let's take the 60 Minutes thing as an example. The president of the United States and the people around him have decided to exercise leverage over more and more of civil society, right? And they're just doing it in a way that previous administrations thought was somehow wrong, or it was just out of bounds. We don't do that sort of thing. But those were just norms. They weren't required. And so this administration says, you know what? We're going to weaponize every lever of government against every institution we can. We're going to threaten the universities. We're going to threaten the law firms. We're going to sue the media. And the result is this sometimes unofficial soft power, this pressure on the corporate leadership of media. So you end up with things like the 60 Minutes situation, and you end up with self-censorship. And so I feel like I need to read more about the Viktor Orban model
Hmm.
of what's happening and whether what Trump is doing has already modeled on what Orban has done in Hungary.
Let's get Ann Applebaum on the phone and get to the bottom of this. So it is interesting, right? Like, on one hand, it seems like the Trump administration has a very kind of organized plan of co-opting and taming and threatening and intimidating, senators, politicians, academia, Harvard, lawyers and law firms, the media, 60 Minutes, ABC. And it seems very orchestrated that they're, going through an authoritarian sort of checking the boxes of like, who do we got to take over the military, Pete Hegseth, Department of, all right, we got to take over this. So it seems very orchestrated, very planned, very devious, very smart, very evil. On the other hand, you know, um, who was it that, I think Jonah Goldberg said Trump isn't Hitler. Hitler could have repealed Obamacare. I think it was Jamie Kirchick who said Trump isn't a fascist. He's a golfer. There is a sense that, you know, Trump is doing stupid things, including crashing the economy, that are going to make it harder for him to impose. Now, I do know at some point there could be a disaster, like if the economy crashed, that could be used as a false flag to declare martial law or something. But I think right now, at this point, what Trump should be doing is sort of consolidating power and popularity. And yet he's doing stupid things that seem to be pretty clearly going to be undermining this. And so I guess the question I'm asking you, Will, and I know you've been thinking about this, is this evil or stupid or some combination?
It's a combination. I've just drafted something about this that should be in the Bulwark today. It's going to be those of us who have opposed Donald Trump for years have tried to make the case that he is evil and dangerous. He's an authoritarian. He's corrupt. We made that case. We got, almost enough people to win an election. We had a pandemic. We beat him once. He comes back after having attempted a coup, and Americans decide to reelect him. So my conclusion is, yes, he is evil and dangerous, and we told as many people as would listen, and we got their votes, and it wasn't enough people. So we need to reach beyond that and talk about other reasons to be against the Trump party, the J.D. Vance party, whatever it's going to be after Trump. And my argument there is Trump is doing so many things that are just stupid. They're like, you don't have to agree with those of us in the center or the center left about the separation of powers, about the Constitution, about the role of the executive. But can you agree with us that Donald Trump is doing a really crap job of running the economy? Can you agree that his trade war against our allies, against 180 countries, was stupid? Can you agree that the way that Elon Musk is cutting the government, that they're just like going in with a chainsaw and hacking out one thing after another? You may agree that the government needs to be cut, but not this way.
Mm-hmm.
Can you agree that putting the editor of The Atlantic on a signal chat about imminent strikes in Yemen was stupid, right? Can you just agree with us about this, that basically these people they're idiots. They don't know how to run a country. If you can agree with us on that, then maybe we have enough of a coalition to throw the bums out. And so that's basically my pitch, is we need to reach beyond the audience of people who agree with us about morals, about the Constitution and stuff like that.
Well, I think the one area where we really could debate the stupid versus evil thing is the immigration roundups, where on one hand, they seem to be deporting people who are innocent, to this El Salvadorian gulag, and admitting that it was an accident or a mistake. But then I think you could argue, the cruelty is the point, right? They want to intimidate everyone else, send a signal to political adversaries that you could be next, and also send a message to immigrants or would-be migrants. A, don't come here. B, if you're here, self-deport. So maybe they only have to do something super evil 100 times to result in, millions of immigrants fleeing or not coming. So there may be a method to the madness on that one. And I think it's harder to disaggregate whether that's stupidity, incompetence, or outright evil.
Yeah, the deportations is a tricky thing. So part of what I did for this article is I looked at polling on all these topics, but one of them is deportations. And on deportations, they asked people, do you think the administration is making mistakes in who it's deporting? The Abrego Garcia case was an admitted mistake, right?
Well, yes, but yes and no, right?
They
They
did the
admitted
Orwell
it,
thing.
and then they called him and then Stephen Miller said he's a terrorist and whatever gang member, and so they have it both ways.
Right. That is another Orwell case, although Stephen Miller needs more coordination around him because so the government's lawyers said it was an administrative mistake, an administrative error. That's on the record legally.
But then didn't they fire that guy?
I can't remember if that's the same person. But then Stephen Miller on his own came out and said no, and they're trying to marshal that this wasn't a mistake, or even if it was a mistake, it turns out it was the right thing to do. And this is part of never being able to admit you made a mistake, which is part of being stupid and defiant. But the deportations are tricky for the reason that you described. Yes, the government is making mistakes in who they've deported. They're erring on the side of sending out, maybe for the reasons you've described. They want to send a message. We're not going to fuss about the details. We're going to get you out of here. Leave, don't come in. And the other thing is that that's an issue that Republicans own, because most Americans, they want border security. We've talked about this before. I think this is an issue where the Democratic Party didn't do its job, and so the right wing took it over. And this is going to be true in Europe, all over the place, where there's global migration going on, and you got to secure your borders. It's something basic that people in every country want. Because that's an issue that Republicans own, it may be true that even though our government is screwing up some of the deportations, people are going to give them a pass and say, look, on the whole, you're doing the right thing.
Well, it does seem like, for today at least, the Trump administration is starting to back down on, we've already mentioned several. Another one that we haven't really, you did mention Doge, but I think it's been reported Elon Musk now wants to focus more on Tesla and his growing family. And so he's going to be stepping away from spending less time on Doge. And once again, I think this is an example. Look, we saw what happened in Wisconsin where Elon Musk went all in Wisconsin and was repudiated at the ballot box in that election. Was it last month or something like that? And so I think that this is an example of them trying to, they didn't want to. If Elon Musk had announced this immediately, it would have been perceived as, a loss. But I think that's what this is. But I wonder if it's sustainable or if it's just a strategic retreat, and then a week from now, Trump will get bored and start, declaring war on Australia or something, or Canada.
Well, the Musk part of it is, I kind of suspect, my metaphor for this is, what does Musk do? He's got rockets, right? The rockets come down, and Trump always would tell this story about how the rocket's coming down, and it looks like how is he going to land that thing? And then they say somehow, shielded and protected, and it comes down and it lands fine and everything. My model for this is the heat shield, right? When rockets go up and they re-enter, they've got to be properly shielded. And I think of Musk as Trump's heat shield on this, and that he's been burned up. Then you just jettison it, right? Like Musk took all the heat for Doge. In fact, if you look at polling on this, which I was just looking at, you just substitute the word Musk for Trump talking about the cuts, and people are much more negative. He hasn't built up what Trump's built up in the way of residual, like no matter what he does, I'm with him. Musk doesn't have that the same way. So then Musk just wanders up, goes back into his business, which is not cratering, but it's the Tesla's obviously in trouble because he's branded himself that way as the Trump guy. And I wonder whether, as Musk exits, that shield that protects Trump ends up, with less opposition, at least less negative feeling from the public over the cuts, and that just goes with Musk. What do you think?
I think if the czar knew what was happening, he wouldn't put up with it. I think you're right. I think that we'll call him a lightning rod, that Elon Musk.
There you go.
Sucked up a lot of the negative attention and disdain that Trump otherwise might have endured. And then what happened is, I think we saw in that Wisconsin election that Elon Musk was ballot box poison. And if he stays in, he's been quiet lately. We haven't heard much. We didn't notice because there's so much other crazy stuff happening. But Musk, since the tariffs really were announced, since, quote, Liberation Day, Musk has taken a much lower profile. I think he doesn't like the tariffs, doesn't believe in tariffs for one thing, but just generally speaking, he's been kind of phased out for about a month now, a much lower profile. And I think that that they recognized that if Democrats could make Musk, plausibly make Musk the face of the Republican Party in the midterms, it would be an even bigger bloodbath than we're currently expecting.
Right, right. The Wisconsin case is a good example. And I need you to explain something to me, Matt. So with Donald Trump says he's a billionaire. I believe there's a lot of debate about Trump's actual finances, but people believed in polling that Trump is a billionaire. And Democrats made the case, you can't have this billionaire running the country. He's for the rich. He's for people like him. And it didn't really work. Didn't work well enough. And then along comes Elon Musk, who is admittedly much richer than Trump. But somehow the whole Democratic message about the oligarchs and the billionaires sticks to Musk in a way it doesn't stick to Trump. Why is that?
Well, I think it makes sense that it sticks to Musk. I mean, Musk looks like a villain out of Central Casting. He seems weird. And I think that so to me, it makes sense that the public would turn against Musk as this archetypical villain. What I don't understand is why Trump is Teflon, why Trump is immune to this, why Trump is comparatively so much more likable and that there's so much residual affection for him. I can only imagine it's because I wasn't a real viewer of The Apprentice, or maybe there are other reasons. But whatever the case may be, I think it is very clear that Donald Trump has a certain something that is not transferable, and that the rules that apply to everyone else, including Elon Musk, who is famous and rich, do not apply to Trump. So I wish I fully understood why. So I get the Musk. I get why people don't like Musk.
Right.
I don't get why they do like Trump. I mean, I get it a little bit. He can be funny. There is a certain charm, but not enough to compensate for the craziness that he is.
Yeah, there's something. I mean, there's going to be more billionaires in politics. I'm thinking about J.B. Pritzker at the moment, but like, it's great to have billionaires. If you're a political party, people come in. This is an area well, that they can self-fund. That's great, but then you have the problem of people don't like billionaires. But there's some kind of magic that this Teflon magic that Trump's got that people are going to try to copy. I guess you can't really emulate it. You either got to have it or you don't.
Indeed. All right. Well, this is a great place to end it. I think I have other questions, but let's stop it here with the big question hanging out there. What is it that Trump has? This magnetism that I've been frankly discussing and debating now literally for a decade.
Yeah.
And we're getting close, but we don't quite have it. So everybody go check out Will. Where can we find your videos and your writings?
At the bulwark.com, Bulwark YouTube channel. We've got videos, we've got podcasts, we've got plain old articles like you and I have always written. So enjoy.
Awesome, my friend. Well, another great discussion, as I always have when you join us. Will Saletan, thanks for coming back on the show.
Thanks, Matt.